Welcome back to the Toxic Mom Recovery Podcast. I'm in my new office, so I'm very excited. Today we are going to be answering some very important questions like, how do I address my mom when she makes negative comments? How do I let it go and not take things so personally? And a super important question of, how do I finally accept that there's nothing I can do or say to make her magically love me? These are all incredibly important questions and deserve to be answered, and so we're going to be talking about them today. As always, you can like and subscribe to make sure that you get notified every time I release a video. We're releasing every Wednesday, and so let's go ahead and dive in. Question came from a lady in my Facebook group, and she said, my therapist is telling me to set boundaries because my mom is narcissistic, but it's really difficult, and she's trying to ignore a lot and let it go, but it's really hard to not say something back or to get defensive. So how do I deal with this? And really, I often find that awareness is incredibly important when you're dealing with this kind of thing. So starting to notice that your mom isn't the kind of person who is going to respect you. She's not the kind of person who can respect you. And so because of this, because you now know this about her, you get to decide how much access she has to you. How much are you going to let somebody like that into your life? Does that mean that you're going to be talking to them all the time? Does that mean you're going to be in their presence, seeing them often? And because you can't change her behavior, but you can adjust how much access you have to somebody like that, or how much access somebody like that has to you. By limiting your interactions with somebody like this, you're automatically going to be lessening how much of an opportunity she has to make these negative comments. You're going to be taking away the opportunity to feel defensive because you're not going to be around as much. And really, the important thing to realize with moms who are like this, people who are always making negative comments or trying to put others down, realizing that that's out of their own wounding. It actually has nothing to do with you, and it has everything to do with your mom, with how she feels, with how she was raised, with her mindset, her stuff. And she thinks, oh, well, if I can put you down, if I can make you feel bad, that will magically make me feel better. And it really doesn't. And it's also incredibly damaging for you. So your mom is that kind of person who just feels the need to put you down all the time, and limiting the interactions that you have with her is going to be the next step in your healing journey. Boundaries only really go so far. You can only communicate with somebody so much, saying, hey, mom, don't make comments like that. You say that again, then I'm going to leave. Then that means the visit's going to be over. You can put parameters around it, but really, any sort of words that you say to an emotionally immature and narcissistic person, they're just going to argue with you, right? They're going, oh, well, you're being so sensitive. I don't understand why. What you need to do is take action. Action is something that they understand. And action, you walking away, you ending the conversation, hanging up the phone, whatever that is, that's something that they cannot fight you on. And if they do try to keep you from leaving, then that's when you call the cops, because they're officially kidnapping. You are powerful. That's the biggest thing. So many people get caught up because they feel like, oh, well, I can't do this or I can't do that. No, you have options. You don't have to stay in a relationship. You don't have to stay super close to somebody who's treating you poorly, who's doing all of these things. There are ways, if you feel like you need to be around them, there are ways to adjust and to manage it so it's not affecting you so much. The second part of her question was, how do I not take it so personally? And really knowing that your mom is emotionally immature, that she is this toxic person, is automatically going to help you kind of distance yourself a bit from what she's saying, because oh, well, that's just her being immature. I don't need to take what she says to heart, because she's actually acting out of her own wounding. So even knowing that is going to help give you some distance from what she says. And also realizing that really, when your mom is acting out of this, that's her little kid, right? It's her little girl inside that's wounded, that's hurt, that's trying to get something. Maybe she's trying to get a need met, and it's doing it in an unhealthy way because she never learned. And so you can have understanding for that, but it's you wouldn't be offended if a little kid says, well, why are you doing it that way? It's no, you don't know any better. So even shifting the way that you view your mom and seeing her as a little kid. Once again, this is the situation, if you feel maybe you're your mom's caregiver and you're I can't leave. There's, if I don't take care of her, nobody else will. And so if you're in that kind of situation, shifting the way you see your mom, she's not mom, right? She's not that safe, kind, loving adult that mom should be. Your mom is a little kid. And so seeing that, it's okay, you're the caretaker. So if she says things that are negative, that's just a little kid. It's a little kid who's stubborn, who's not getting their way. They're being a little snot because they're upset that you're not doing exactly what they want. And that's okay. You can have that's okay, little kid. It's okay. I understand you're upset. and this is what we're going to do. Having those boundaries, having those limits is going to be incredibly powerful for you. And it's going to start teaching her, once again, like these actions, right? Teaching her, this is how you treat people. You don't get to treat me this way because, once again, it's the little kid, right? No, this isn't how we treat people. This is what you can do. And giving choices is huge. I talk about this in the Toxic Mom Recovery Guide. When it comes to setting boundaries, you don't have to say, you need to stop that. You say, Mom, you can either ask me this way or you can ask me this way. What are you going to choose? And if she's like, well, I don't have to do either of those. You're right. Okay. And then you walk away because it's done. There's no need to engage, to argue, to get like down in the muck with this kind of person. You just say, this is what I can do for you, or these are your options. And if she doesn't like it, then she doesn't get it. Like it becomes very simple when you start thinking about it in these terms. When you start getting that emotional distance from it, it's not your mom. It's this wounded little girl who is trying to get something or who is lashing out. And so that helps you be able to distance yourself from that behavior. Another way to start getting emotional distance is to start cutting those emotional ties with your mom. Shifting and seeing her as a little girl is very helpful. And also starting to just notice those emotional ties, those connections that you do have to her. And so this is an exercise that I share in the Toxic Mom Recovery course, where just imagining seeing yourself and seeing your mom, maybe she's standing, across the room from you or wherever it is, but noticing that there's these vines or these ropes or these chains, whatever comes to mind for you, there's these things that are connecting you together. And there's these emotional connections because you've had a whole life together. You've had all these experiences, all these memories, all this stuff. And so seeing those as connections and then noticing there's a tool next to you. There's something here, and you can start cutting those ties, cutting those emotional connections. Now, this doesn't mean that you hate your mom, that she's this horrible, awful person. Maybe she is, but she's being able to say, okay, I'm not going to have this level of connection. You're not going to have this many vines in me anymore. You're not going to have all these access points, all these ways that you can come into my life and affect me. You're starting to cut those or to rip them out or whatever that looks like for you, whatever visually, because your imagination is incredibly important with this, accessing your subconscious, imagining, visualizing, seeing it and feeling it as you cut those vines, as you cut those ties. And that really frees you up because you're no longer oh, well, she looked like this and that reminded me of this and this and this and this time. You're saying, oh, she looked like this. I remember when that used to really bother me. I remember when that used to make me feel this way. And now I can be at peace because that tie isn't there anymore. And so doing visual exercises like this, engaging your senses, the visual and the kinesthetic, feeling it is incredibly important and so powerful as a part of your healing journey. So if you haven't gotten the Toxic Mom Recovery Guide or the course yet, I highly recommend you do that because I walk you through, give you all these different exercises so you can start doing this on your own. This isn't some gatekeeping operation. There are so many ways to heal and to move forward from your mom, and it doesn't have to take forever. So many different ways that you can heal and start to release those emotional ties, those emotional connections that are making it hard. Because that's really what it is. When people have a hard time setting boundaries or getting emotional distance or saying no or whatever, it's because there's these emotional ties. There's these things that are keeping us connected to that person. And so when you start to remove those, once again, not going into hate or bitterness or I'm just chopping you off. That's not what this is. This is going within and saying, okay, there's a connection here and this doesn't need to be here anymore because it's not safe for me to be this connected to this person anymore. And so adjusting and shifting the way that you relate to your mom is going to be a game changer. Third question is, how do I finally accept that there's nothing I can do or say that will magically make my mom love me? And this is such an important part of the healing process, is realizing is really acceptance. Accepting that that's how your mom is, and also accepting that there's nothing you can do about it. And when you let go of that control, when you let go of that fight, well, I'm going to make her love me. I'm going to make sure she sees me. I'm going to make sure she knows me. You can't make anybody do anything. And so if you've been spending a lot of your a lot of energy trying to be well, she's going to do this, or I'm going to make her love you, you're just going to end up so frustrated and so exhausted because you can't make anyone do anything. And so accepting okay, this is how she is, and that's okay. It's not right. It's not what I needed. It's not what I wanted. And that's okay. And when you realize like you can't make your mom love you, when you kind of let go, that's part of, another aspect of healing is like, okay, so there's still an aspect of you that's, you're a little kid inside and you just want your mom to love you. And so even visually, like imagining yourself like going back to a moment in time when you were a little kid and you needed a mother, you needed someone to love you, you needed someone to care for you, and imagining like present day you going back to that little kid and giving them the comfort and the love and the affection that they needed can be incredibly powerful, helping you heal and move forward. It's also incredibly important to build up your sense of self-worth, to know that you are innately lovable and precious regardless of what anybody else thinks. Just because your mom can't see it or love you or accept you doesn't mean that you aren't worthy of love. It says so much about how incredibly wounded and broken she is. You have always been lovable and precious. You have always been whole and deserving of love. Not because of anything that you did or didn't do, but because you're a human being on this planet. Like, you are precious and you are lovable. Acceptance looks like realizing that you've been stuck on this idea of, well, if I could just do this, then things could be different. And letting that go and grieving. Grieving is such an important part. It's such an underrated part of the healing process. Grieving what you didn't have with your mom, grieving what it should have been, and grieving what it will never be. This is something I also talk about in the guide is like, okay, how do you start walking through this grieving process? And we'll talk about this more in the podcast. Grieving is such an important part of healing. Only when we grieve, and truly like mourn the loss that we've experienced can we truly move forward. So once again, if you haven't already, I highly recommend you get the Toxic Mom Recovery Guide. I'll put the link in the comments below. As always, I'll be releasing these videos on Wednesdays, and you can always follow me on TikTok and Instagram at Catherine the Grace. Thank you so much for being here. Make sure you like and share, and I'll see you guys next time.